The following program features language some listeners may find offensive. Listener discretion is advised.
I invented the Twiddle Scratch or flash crab scratch, and there's been debates so who invented that, and because I showed that to Q-bert and Shortcut in Japan in the early 90s, and that was because I was trying to learn the flare scratch back home. I ended up developing that, and then I showed them that, and now it's one of the most recognized scratch in the world. So
you are listening to Hip Hop Cymru Wales, a podcast exploring the trails and untold tales of Welsh hip hop. My name is Lloyd Bailey and I'm a podcaster, best known for the Fly Fidelity podcast, and I'm talking to key players about the notable and nuanced evolution of Welsh hip hop history.
Bow for my man who can rock a jam. Dedicate this to all Welsh DJs. Take it back to brass knucks and blast those. I spare a bar for every nebulous slum. Yellow brick days of Welsh heritage. Don't mess with the wicked. Smash down the walls, the revolution's coming at you. We rolled into town with mics in our holster. Captain of our ship, with a master of our fate. With a dream to succeed where most men fail. Rock stars, bars, hard on Belushi flesh. As soon as I hit the stage, my presence is felt. You wanna rock up on my mic, I'll bang ya. Vanilla story ever told for me. From the land of the mystical dragon hearts. Gritty, my life story.
Welcome to the program. Formerly known as DJ XL, DJ Bad Meaning Good is this week's guest on Hip Hop Cymru Wales. In this rare interview, DJ Bad Meaning Good speaks to his humble beginnings and early inspirations on his journey to becoming one of the most recognizable turntablists in Welsh history. We discuss over 3 decades of experience and iconic battles, including the DMC Championships and Vestax, as well as inventing a Twiddle Scratch / crab scratch, and so much more.
So my name's Maya Lloyd. I was born in Folkestone in Kent, and my dad was in the army, and we ended up moving back to I got Welsh blood, but I was born up in Folkestone because dad was in the army. We moved back down here in the 80s, 1980, I think 79, 80. And then I moved to the small community up in Cwmbran, and ended up meeting a load of lads through school and stuff, all like-minded, who all loved hip-hop, basically listening to John Peel, who was the only person that was actually playing any hip-hop at the time. And so we used to wait, I think it was 12:30, his latest show, or he started at 11 till 1. And I used to just wait up every time his show was on with an old-school cassette player. And then as soon as he introduced a hip-hop track, that was just play, just recorded those tracks, and then just made these amazing mixtapes, and everyone had the same sort of idea, or putting those mixtapes together. And that was my first exposure really to listening to hip hop. And then initially I was a b-boy after watching Breakdance the movie. And me and one of my mates, his name's Rob Carlton, amazing sort of body popper and breakdancer. We used to go over to this guy in Thornhill who owned a shop, Tony, and he had a video rental place. And we used to randomly, we went in there one day and it had Breakdance the movie, how to body pop and breakdance for 50 pence a time. So we literally just hired that out for months and just practiced on that. Well, the routines weren't good at first, but you just keep going, and that was the first exposure really to b-boying or breakdancing. And it's breakdancing now, but obviously it's b-boying and popping and locking and stuff. And then we just met other guys randomly who were doing a similar thing, and all became friends and formed a crew called Crazy Rock. I went up my dad's attic the other month and I found the original top, because we were sponsored by Cwmbran Town for Live Aid to do performances, graffiti, and doing a b-boy demonstration for the crowd. And I found the actual top. It's like a sweat top, and it's got crazy rock on the front, Cwmbran Shopping. So a real nice piece of history there,
Very cool. It's always felt like, for whatever reasons, Cwmbran has always felt less represented and celebrated as other regions in Wales. Give me a sense of making the best of those moments and, I guess, elevating your identity back then. How instrumental do you think isolation was for you, developing who you were?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I don't see it in any way negative that we weren't. I don't think anywhere was recognised because it was so new. I mean, we're talking. Well, I was 13 when I really started getting into hip hop, graffiti, and so I didn't think anything of it. I was just fell in love with the sound. As soon as I heard the Street Sounds collection, the Morgan Khan stuff, I was just all over it. You know, I heard that, and then Public Enemy came in with Yo Bum Rush the Show album, and I know that was slightly later, but that whole thing, I was just obsessed with the culture from b-boying, because we were big. All our crew were massive fans of Beat Street. Obviously, Breakdance, the movie, a bit more cheesy, but the moves were just unbelievable, and the music. And then when Beat Street came out, that was just unbelievable. You know, the graffiti, that aspect, and then the dancing, and then those battles with Arthur Baker's Breaker's Revenge tune. And then we used to go to a thing in Maskell. It's now King's Church, down on the way down to Pill, but it was a roller skating place. I don't know if anyone remembers, like a disco and roller skating. And then on a Saturday afternoon from 5 till 6, it was called Breaking Hour, and all the crews used to come down, battle each other, and we always used to think we was in Beat Street. And it was amazing. There was a guy called Robbie Howells, a Welsh DJ, amazing DJ at the time, and he used to DJ and play all the tunes. And we used to just go in there and kick back and just really enjoy it, and sort of lived for the Saturday, really. But as for Cwmbran, it's the isolation side. Like I said, I didn't really notice that. People don't realize, I mean, this is a long time ago. No internet, no DVDs. Video was very, very basic. You know, we still had Betamax and VHS. And as for like seeing anyone else do any kind of DJing, like we used to look at Flashdance. You know the film Flashdance?
Absolutely.
Because Crazy Legs was in that, doing part. He was playing, you know, different parts and roles in that film.
That's right.
And even Footloose, there was a guy doing a popping thing in there. That's all we had access to. But if we saw it in a film, that's what we used to watch over and over and over. In training videos, that Breakdance the movie thing, that was the only thing I'd ever found. So any sort of source we could find to look what was happening, that's the only avenue we had. But that creates new ideas, and because you don't know what anyone else is doing, so you try and mimic that, but then try and advance on what they see, and you end up being sort of innovative in that respect. From those b-boy days, that sort of took me into that carried on across into my DJing. I loved that whole beginning period of discovering hip hop in Cwmbran. That was, you know, from New York to Cwmbran. Who would have thought it? Eh?
I mean, all of this you're experiencing right at the start of its infancy, like you said. There's multiple active crews battling, breakdancing. There's a couple of DJs at the time. What DJs outside of who you mentioned earlier are DJing at this timeline?
Well, in our little crew, we weren't, because we had a posse. It was called the LSD posse. So, and there was a guy. His name was Shun. We called him Shun Lee Shunman. He was sort of producing beats, and it was Tucker MC Bass. He was an amazing MC. These are all Cwmbran lads, and then we had all the b-boy crews like Rob Carlton and Geordie and all those other guys. There's too many to remember, really. And then the DJ inside, there was lots of us, but there was me, DJ JB, amazing DJ. Jason Milner was a wicked DJ as well, and I can't think of everyone's names, to be honest. There's Martin Lind, and there was loads of us, and obviously Jamie Winchester, who I met through DMCs, and now I work very closely with. And Jamie Winchester, if you don't know, he's the owner of Play It Loud Studios, and he's Lady Leisha's manager. So a really good close friend of mine, and an amazing DJ. I don't know how many people actually know that, but he invented quite a lot of tricks in the DMC times. So we ended up meeting at Martha's Vineyard. But there was loads of guys who were DJing all at the same time. And we used to go to each other's house and we'd take it in turns showing our set, you know, which we've been practicing. And again, there was no outside influence apart from, if you want to learn a scratch, we'd have to listen to records and try and work out how they did it, because you couldn't see anyone doing it, you know. Back in the day, you could only get mostly American imports. So I used to get all my music imported. Then I ended up working in a record shop in Cwmbran, Apple Stump Records, owned by Richard Sampson, really, really cool guy who used to help everybody out, doing a lot of stuff for the sort of music community and especially the hip hop guys. We made records from there and everything. And then I had the opportunity then to order a lot of imported stuff for people in Cwmbran and Newport, and they used to come down and get their music from us. But we all used to go to Groove Records up in Greek Street in London. It's a very famous record shop. It's gone now. And then me and my other mate, Jason Milner, we'd go to Birmingham, Don Christie's Records. We'd tell our mothers we were going to each other's houses, and we'd end up going down on the train, going to a club, and then we'd get a load of records and we'd sleep in the car park until the next morning, and then we'd come back. It was just pretty amazing times, really, all for the love of hip-hop and music.
What did your setup look like back then?
Well, I mean, we were all skint. My dad was a miner, and I didn't actually have decks. One of our lads, Ricky, really nice guy, Ricky Lynch, he had Memorex decks, and he had a realistic mixer from a place called Tandy, which was an electronics shop back in the day, and they don't exist anymore. But that mixer had a phono switch on it, where we could do transformers, and we would listen to Terminator X from Public Enemy doing. It was a scratch. He goes rock and roll. He scratches that rock and roll like that. And when we heard that, we all just ripped that off and tried to copy it. And that's the only way we could learn how to scratch, listening to other people, because you couldn't see it anywhere. So we'd all go down his house. He had these decks, and Memorex decks were belt driven. So he had the best setup at the time. But my setup was literally a old hi-fi, belt drive hi-fi with a built-in cassette tape, and not even up faders or cross faders, just like an audio knob, turning it up and down, like, you know, a normal, I don't know what you call it, it's just a volume up and down. Then I had one of those old decks which you could play 8 records at a time, and each time one finished, the other one would fall down. Well, we didn't have mixers, so I had one of those with this spindle. So I sawed the spindle off because it was like massive. Sawed it down, and then I snapped the plastic bit off. But this one was a direct drive, and it had an up fader on it, out of all the other things. But we had no mixer, so I started to learn how to scratch on that, listening to Jazzy Jeff, the Magnificent, and I damaged all my records first of all because I didn't realize I needed a slip mat. So I remember it was a UTFO track, and I turned it over, and it was all these white lines on the back where I'd been battering it without a slip mat. And then slowly but surely you learn this information. And then, like I said, we didn't have a mixer, so when I used to practice trying to mix records together, you had to do it by ear, and that's why we learned. Everyone who sort of came up in those days were really good at actually just mixing records, you know, not alone just scratching, but mixing, because most of us didn't have the equipment. So and we didn't have many records, so you just had to learn by ear, because there was no pitch controls on any of these things. So you just had to slow it down with your finger. So you very quickly learned to listen to tracks and know if they were within 1, 2, or 3 BPMs of each other.
You said you very quickly learned to do that. How long did it take you?
Well, the early days, like I said, I think because I was breaking for a couple of years, then got into graffiti, and I've always been into art because my mum used to teach me how to draw and stuff. And we all went through that for a while. But when I seriously started to get into DJing, obviously you can't get anywhere until you get your Technics, because at the time they were the holy grail and very expensive. But my dad, unfortunately, got, as we were saying, he got made redundant from the mine, and he bought me my first set of Technics decks, and then I had to pay him back £15 a month or a week. And I went up in the attic a couple of weeks ago again, looking through, and I found my payment book with all the dates on it, and I had to sign it every week, and it took me about 3 years to pay off my decks. £15 a month, or £15 a week, every single week. But
Which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it was massive amounts. But for me, I had Technics decks in my room. But the only problem is I didn't have a mixer for another 4 or 5 months because I couldn't afford it. So I had 2 brand new Technics decks in my room, and I just could not use them. So I ended up getting the mixer and then slowly just building up my record collection. And then a few sort of things started coming out. Then we heard other DJs, and I just kept practicing and hearing. It was mostly mixtapes. Like there was a guy called DJ Cheese from America, one of the first guys who won the World Championships. Chad Jackson. Then DMC used to bring out mixes. So it started to trickle through then. And I think it was Cash Money won the World Finals, and that was on video, and we saw that, and that was the end of it. It sort of opened our eyes to a lot of stuff, and that's when I really started practicing hard. But then from there, it took me about 3 years from nothing to get to my first UK final, I think.
Let's go back to practice for a second, because you're talking about a pretty long timeline. 3 years, you said it takes you to get to this point.
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years. Well, my first DMC was 1987. I think it was 1987 in Swansea. So 87, 86, 85. You know, I can't remember 100% what the time frame was, but was it 13, 14, 15, 15, 16? Yeah, it's got to be about 3 years, because I was about 18, 17 in 1987, something like that. So yeah, it's about 3 years to get there, which is quite a short period of time, really, considering we were playing catch up.
Yeah, you were, absolutely, because of course London is ahead of Wales.
Yeah.
You've said it before. Now,
yeah.
Talk about those 3 years. Can you speak to any, I guess, sort of eureka moments in honing your craft and balancing versatility and unpredictability within your style? What was that like as a growing period for you?
Well, first of all, I was obsessed by it. So I came home from school and straightened the decks, got a new record, did something on that, and just learned the techniques. And like I said, there was hardly anything. You couldn't really pick up anything. We didn't see very many DJs anywhere. But like I said, once the DMC videos started coming out, and some of these were leaked, and you got access on tapes, these crazy mixtapes were going around, videotapes of really low quality stuff. But the DMCs come out with Cash Money, and we saw all the other guys from around the world. And then obviously you emulate them first to get to that standard. Because what I always used to do to practice, especially later in my DJing and my battling career, was I'd look at everybody else, but I would only focus on the world champion. And if I wasn't as good as him or capable enough to beat him, then I wasn't good enough.
That was your benchmark.
Yeah, of course, because I wanted to be the world champ. So I would only focus. Obviously, I would still take notes of what everyone else was doing, but the only person I needed to beat was whoever was the best at that time. And obviously, things change. But that's a high. It's a high benchmark, but. It's more realistic, being honest. It's like, it's no point trying to be as good as the third place guy, because he didn't win it.
Right.
He didn't win. And if you want to win, you got to be, at the time. But I wasn't really into it for the winning it. I just loved doing it. It was it was just an amazing skill. So what did you say? Technique wise, what I've developed, because DMC initially was, it stands for Disco Mix Club, and it was a lot of mixing, like normal DJs mix now in a club. There was a lot of that, with a few elements of scratching and beat juggling. Well, beat juggling didn't exist for a long time, just sort of tricks where people used to do basic stuff. I mean, you had Chad Jackson, this guy, he made quite a few records. He was the UK champion for a while, and he was using snooker cues and all these different kitchen sinks, everything to scratch on records. And it was just amazing. I was thinking, this is unreal. And I want some of this action, So when you see these things, you try it yourself. And a lot of it is just trial and error, and you just do it by mistake, and you do something really good. And it's just, it was easy for me, because I was in love with it,
So coming up and showcasing your skills, What kind of impact did those house parties, which there was a lot of back then, what kind of impact does that have on you in terms of your perspective of audiences and realizing the power behind the turntables?
Well, we used to go to this a weekly event. It was like a disco, more or less. It was Speakeasy, it used to be called. And I just got my decks. I think with the guy, his name was Barry Desmond, really nice guy who used to do the DJ. And we always go down there, all hooking up, looking for girls and etc. And you know the deals, young lads all ready to rock. Sure. And I ended up doing my first set there, and actually used Debbie Gibson and Bros.
Wow.
As a mix. It was like Debbie Gibson, Only in My Dreams, and I Owe You Nothing by Bros. So it wasn't even hip hop, but we were playing to a different crowd. So even then I had an understanding of that you have to play to whoever's there, Yeah. So, and then what you got to think of then, we had a lot of hassle when hip hop came in. There was a lot of sort of, like, we all used to walk around with bomber jackets, the old Beastie Boys thing where everyone used to steal the alt rack and stuff. So we had these bomber jackets on, but there was a lot of people weren't into hip hop like we were. There's a big crew of us, like 30 or 40 people, B-boys, breakers, MCs, everything, artists. But a lot of people weren't into it like they are now. I mean, everyone's been touched now by hip hop at some point, through advertising, clothing, music, anything. But back then it was so unique, and there was a lot of hassle, like fighting, disrespect. People into rock music hated the hip hop guys and all that sort of stuff, silly stuff. But it took a while for people to get into it. So I used to DJ in there now and again, and did my first set, and it was good, but it was pop music. I didn't even play any hip hop at all. But then he used to play a lot of DMC mixes, so we used to love all that, and they were pre-made mixes which you could buy the records from. So Barry, I think it was Barry Desmond, he used to play the tunes in there, and it exposed a lot of people to the music, and it slowly changed where instead of being anti-hip-hop, especially after we started doing competitions and people could turn up, we all used to end up going to a place in Swansea, Martha's Vineyard, which was just amazing, on a Wednesday night. And before any of us were sort of really doing any damage on the scene, we used to just go there and dance and meet other people, and it was just a killer night in the I think late 80s, early 90s, and that's where I saw Cutmaster Swift and DJ Pogo from London doing that. They came down and did a tour, and I spoke to them. I got a photograph with them, and I said, "So I'm going to be a champion one day." We got this photograph, and I ended up being invited into their crew, the Enforcers, which was very kind of those lads. But strange how things turn out.
Take me back into that moment, being at Martha's Vineyard, like you say, being surrounded by so many people who are now accepted of hip-hop, being around your friends, being around you people. What are those moments like? What are they playing at the club?
Well, it was all like, Big Daddy Kane. You're talking Big Daddy Kane, Kid and Play, all the 90s artists, Eric B, Rakim, all those guys, obviously the masters, what they do. But for us, we didn't have any real nightclubs in Cwmbran, and there was one in Newport we used to go to, which was Ritzy's at the time, but they didn't play really hip hop. Obviously, it's a poppy chart place. So this was a specific night aimed at dance music and 90s. You had house music in there, early house music, and predominantly hip hop, and everyone used to go on there and do the dances, and we'd be copying all the films like House Party, and then obviously beat break dance, all those battles they used to have, and that just spawned a massive wave of fashion. We were all ripping off when MC Hammer came out, everyone just walked around with those massive trousers on, those big. I remember I had a massive big red baggy pair. Everyone had them on. I mean, we looked ridiculous. So it was like Alibaba. But you didn't care, man. I just didn't. No one cared, and everyone was trying to, dance. There's a dance called a WAP and all these different things, and we all copied that. And there was never any hassle. It was just a really good vibe, and for us, it was like exciting because we were still really young, and we were in this amazing sort of nightclub with this killer soundtrack and killer music playing. And I was thinking, what is this? This is unbelievable. It was just for the vibe, and and obviously the more DVD, not even DVDs, the more videos that came out, and they were influenced by hip hop culture, the more access to it we saw. Like I said, the fashion, we all started, putting tram lines in our hair and all these different things, and the color, because 90s was like really colorful. Everyone was just dressed amazing. And that's why everyone still dresses like that now, because it was just a brilliant period in fashion, not just in the music. There's the hip hop fashion was just took over the world, didn't it? And it's still there now.
My name is DJ Demo, out of Swansea, South Wales. I've been a DJ since 1985 till the present day. Still kicking on at 52 years old. My first memories of DJ Excel and the whole Cymru crew, that sort of, there was already a fully formed group, rappers, graffiti, DJs. My first memory is when they came down for the 1989 Swansea Heat in the DMC UK finals. And obviously Excel's a very tall guy, so that's the first thing that you notice about him. He came with another DJ, which is Buzz, DJ JB, out of Cymru as well. A rapper, MC Bass, Mark Bad Belly Lang, Chew, whole crew of them. My first impression of them was they all know their stuff. They're all obviously on it. They're all obviously practicing and into it, just like we all was, discovering it, getting into it, probably all just getting our techniques that year that we was entering the competition. And I remember Excel being very good, very precise, quick. But, just as his partner was, DJ Buzz, JB, he was the same. They was both, very good mixers. I know JB at both of his, he used to DJ with both decks to the one side, because he was a right-hand scratcher, so he used to DJ with both decks to the right-hand side. No, I think the first year I met Excel, he was the same, both decks to one side. And then the second year that I met him, he'd split them and put them in the more traditional battle style in the middle. After that, we all kept contact. We're all still in contact today. I've talked to Buzz this week. I've talked to MC Bass Tucker this week. And I still converse with Excel or Maya, through various means, about videos and DJing and things like that quite regularly. And my most vivid memory of Excel would not be the first time that I met him. It was probably in the third, after about 3 years, when he entered the DMC, and he sort of took it by storm that year, because he came up with a trick, which is probably everybody knows by now, which is the record tapping trick, where you turn it off and tap the deck and it comes out. Came up with that year, and I was in Birmingham in the Heat that he won to go through to the final that year. I was in Birmingham because I went up, as I said, because we had a younger crew member who was only 11, and he entered that Heat, but he wasn't allowed to progress because he was only 11 years old, and obviously you had to be 18 to get in all the clubs where DMC were. But that year Excel came up with that trick, and I remember he brought house down with it. He also did the cigar Hamlet. I don't know if people remember the Hamlet cigar theme tune, where it breaks down, they say, nothing's good as a Hamlet, and he breaks out the cigar. Those were days you could actually smoke in venues, and he busted out cigar, pretended his set had all gone to pot and gone wrong, and then put the theme tune on, busted out cigar, and brought the house down.
So I first met Demo, Alfy, amazing DJ, in the competitions in Swansea, because he's a Swansea lad. There's a couple of the Swansea lads. I forgot. I'm getting on now, so I do forget. But Alfy's, I've always stayed in touch with Alfy, a really good guy. And DJ Random, amazing DJ and a really good, a good friend. And at the time, it used to be a pain in our ass because he used to come down and kick our ass every time he turned up. Because he was I think he was from Bracknell or London, and he'd won the DMC. I think he won the UK at one point before. And we used to hate him because we used to say he came down because it was easier competition for him to win it here, because you had to win a heat. And then you had to go back to, and then you get into the final. But at the time, we was thinking, what's this dude coming down? Welsh, he's like, they're so proud. But ended up being a good mate of his. He's an amazing DJ. But it's just friendly battling. He'd come down, kick all our asses, and then eventually we caught up. It just takes time. But yeah, Random was a wicked guy, and it's good because that exposed us to the first sort of competition we've ever had. And I used to look at him, I think, wow, he's amazing. This guy's wicked. And I still did a lot of mixing. Like one of my first ever DMC in the heat was in Swansea. It was, I played Pinocchio, I've Got No Strings with Public Enemy #1. I mixed those two together. I just mixed it together. I got no strings, the whole meter. And that's what it was like. And then Random comes in and does all these backspins. And I was thinking, oh, shit. That was the end of it. And I was, because like I said, we were a little bit behind.
Right.
And then we sort of advanced and we did really well then. But yeah, those times, those guys were brilliant,
What's the moment that you felt like everything started to change for yourself? Did it take long for you to realize that you wanted to enter battles?
Well, I saw Pogo and Swift doing their demo thing, and I had a chat with them and took some photographs. And they were doing beat juggling. And they went to America quite a lot, because beat juggling, I don't know if people know what that is. You use two of the same record, and like you're doing originally, it's just like you're doing drumming, but you're using one deck on the other deck, and you're just cutting the breaks, like the early pioneers did, like Grandmaster Flash, just extending the break. But then you would do drum patterns, and there was a couple of people in the US, like Steve D was one of the founders of like beat juggling, but I think Pogo and Swift were two of the first guys to actually do that over here, taking two tracks and manipulating the beat. And they did a set, and I saw that and I thought, that's and Random as well. Random was doing that because obviously he had access to those guys, and they were all quite close. So yeah, I saw that, and that sort of pushed me in a direction where you see that and you try and emulate it, and then you come up with your own ideas and your own patterns. But I was always an ideas guy, so I wasn't technically the best scratcher, but I always come up with innovative tricks and ideas, and that's what I got known for in the end.
How did those ideas typically come about, and how would you execute those ideas?
Well, in that 87, it was just the heat in Swansea. I remember doing that, using my Uzi Weighs a Ton Public Enemy, and I did some nice stuff with that. And then I remember doing, I heard it through the grapevine, and Planet Rock mixed that together, just a mix. But somebody came up to me after, and this is how basic it must have been, because, but you got to think you couldn't see this stuff or hear those like mashups. Now everyone knows what a mashup is. Mm-hmm. But only DMC were doing their mixtapes and their records, the vinyls they used to release. Mixtape mashups didn't really exist then. So when you did that, that's where you would see all these mashups. People would, I know, heard it through the grapevine, but then when you smash it with Planet Rock, Bambata, it sounded amazing. Some bloke come up to me and said that he wanted to try and release that as a record at the time. So I thought, hang on, that's interesting. It's just something like I remember that specifically that night. I played that, but then when I saw the other guys doing backspins and stuff, I moved away from the mixing side, and the whole thing changed. Because each year there was a wave. For example, in the DMCs, like the early days, it was lots of mixing, and then all of a sudden, all these sort of using utensils to do mixing, like snooker cues and stuff like that, and crazy acrobatics on the decks. Then it went from that to speed, how fast someone could go, hence DJ David. Then it went a lot more musical, and where it is now, it's obviously it's very technical now, because you've got technology that aids it all now.
Welcome on the Technics next, DJ XL.
was about 1991 was my first UK final. So yeah, and then obviously the more DMC videos would come out each year, the world finals, we get access to seeing that, because you couldn't see the UK ones because they didn't used to film them for a while. But there was a lot of sort of all the Swansea videos, and then like the 87, there was 87 and 88, 89, and we just kept going. And then, so I ended up going into entering a Birmingham heat, and that was it was called XLs, the place which they actually entered. Actually, bar was called XLs, and there was a guy called DJ Tricks, who was an amazing DJ. He did this really random jumping up and down, slapping using 2 tracks and doing just cutting back and forth, like boom boom kick, boom. He used to jump up and down, jump through his legs, and he was amazing. He won that night. I think I came second, but again I was still mixing. I mixed Luther Vandross so amazing with something else, and when I look back at it now, it was like, it sounds cringy, but at the time that was people heard that and they thought, wow, there's a mashup of Luther Vandross, and then you've got these other guys. Yeah, it was like I said, you can listen to mashups all the time now, but then you couldn't really hear it anyway, mixing different genres into stuff. But I was starting to develop my style, and every time you get access to seeing someone who was better than you and was doing stuff, I used to think, right, I got to start switching this up a little bit. So that was my next one. I got to the heat. I didn't get to the final. And then I think, what was my next one? Eventually I won. I entered the Birmingham heat. Me and DJ JB Buzz, we entered it. By this time we'd practiced, we were getting pretty good, getting a lot of ideas. And I used to run it through my mate, Rob Carlton. He was my record feeder, because people, now it's easy, it's all digital, but you had, obviously we were using vinyl.
Right.
And you only get 6 minutes in these battles. So you try and get as many records as you can to save time. You just reach out, your mate would be on the side and he'd hand you the record. So when I used to practice, I used to show it to JB and I'd show it to Carlton, because Carlton was my go-to, because he was honest with me. He'd say that's not good, or that's amazing. And he came up with a lot, he influenced a lot of the stuff I did, come up with different ideas, and he'd say that won't work, or this would work. And then we went to the Birmingham heat, me and JB, and I remember it was amazing. It was rammed. It was so busy. And we were really good that year, like me and him. Buzz went on. I was waiting before it. We called him Buzz, and he went on. He just did this amazing set. I thought, he's got this. And I was, we were all really happy with buzzing. Then I went on and I did this like piece of showmanship thing that really sort of blew people away. And then and me and him won that heat, first and second, and it got recorded as like one of the best heats ever. Actually, the heat was better than the final, people were saying. And I always remember it, and that's what got me on the map, was doing these. And it was some of the tricks we were doing were just, you've got to think this is like 30 plus years ago. I mean, it stands up today. A lot of that stuff now, people wouldn't be able to do that now. And I've forgotten so many things I've done. We've done. I remember in the 1992 finals, I was in that. I didn't win that, but I started with one turntable on one shoulder and one on the other one, just doing back spins like that, and then had loose ends hanging on a string, and then had strings about 3 foot long on each record, and my foot on the crossfade, and then pulling them back, saying, got me hanging on a string. And I mean, to keep that going with a record with a needle on there, and to make it actually work, that it's going back and forth backspin and not jumping. I mean, I practiced that for hours and hours and hours.
How many hours?
I think, you got to think it's once a year DMCs, and you only get 6 minutes. So I would probably practice that set probably 600 or 700, 800 times throughout the year, over and over and over. And I just used to have a mirror in front of me, an old cassette tape player, a record, recorder. I'd watch myself in the mirror, what I was doing, because that's the only way you could see it. You had to style it out as well a little bit, and just hours and hours and hours of practice. But it was never hard work, because I loved it. Each year you don't win, or you come up with something else, and you don't win, and you come up with something. You do start to get a bit demoralized, especially if you think you're the winner. But it was just because I loved doing it, and the more ideas I came up with, the more ideas I came up with. Each time I did something, I thought, right, I can jump off that. So really, that Birmingham heat for me was the thing that sort of got me sort of notoriety a little bit.
So that then solidifies and elevates your reputation. There's a lot to be said about this b-boy ethic of competing that speaks to the energy and drive of what you're talking about, isn't it? How would you describe your judges at that time being an influence in terms of how you would turn their expectations upside down? These judges, a lot of people back then had a love and hate relationship with judges. How would you wow them? And was there kind of a fire in that process to turn upside down their expectations?
Well, it depends which competition, because there was a couple of competitions, like DMC was the primary one, and then Vestax came in. And if people don't know, it's an amazing brand of mixers and turntables. They don't exist anymore, but they were a lot later to the game. Judging was, I used to have a bit of a love-hate, because sometimes I thought I'd won and other people thought I'd won, and then you get a bit disheartened by it. And judging was very different now. Now they've got the best guys judging, the best, they have DJs judging, but then it was like producers or singers or people they knew. So it wasn't always people who were judging didn't really understand. They're looking for different things, Right. So sometimes we'd get, all of us, we'd get a little bit despondent because we thought we had won and they would pick somebody else, even though we didn't think they were as good. But that's just us being enthusiastic, and it didn't put us off because we just kept coming back and I ended up doing it for about 10 years, and then in the end I just got worn out by it all. And then it was changing quite a lot, because it got to a point for me where it was just variations of a theme a little bit more than, and until technology changed, because I'd seen it all. We'd seen every single, from the beginning, from DJ Cheese basically right the way through to the DMCs this Saturday just gone. So the judging side of it, even though sometimes we didn't agree with it, I didn't take much notice of it, to be honest, because look, when you come second in the competition, we used to get 2 Technics 1210s, and I used to walk away. I come second 3 times, so I walked away with, a lot of turntables. So I'd sell my old ones.
That's what you would win?
Yeah, back in the day, even if you come second, you would win a set of turntables, and now it's obviously it's not as big as it is. It's hard to explain. This scene was massive, as for DJing, it was a huge scene. The first UK final was about 3,000 people, and that was in Gold Diggers. My first UK final in Gold Diggers in Chippenham. It was just amazing. Brilliant atmosphere. All our friends come down, just air horns going off, other DJs in the crowds, swearing at you, trying to put you off, and just a good vibe. It's a battle, so you have to expect that. So This is where the practicing came in, because even though you were nervous, they used to call me on and my hands were shaking, really shaking, but I knew I was within reason. I could pull that set off, 9 times out of 10 flawlessly, but you always had a little mistake here and there. But I loved it. That's why I kept coming back. Even though I was disappointed sometimes with some of the results, I always kept coming back because it was the process. I loved getting better,
And you're wrapped up in it, of course. It's interesting you talking about your hands shaking back then. A lot of people I have spoken to have all said the same thing. Doing the DMCs, their hands were shaking. Was it ever hard? Was it ever challenging to not let that show within your process, those nerves, not let that translate in what it was you were doing in your routines? That comes through the practice. And then I teach a lot of children in primary schools and comprehensive or high schools how to DJ, and I show them that 1991 UK final. I think it's 1991 or 90. Can't remember now. And I show them, because I don't even know what record players are, a lot of them, or if they do, they don't own one in the house. Like everyone used to have a record player. Yeah. And I explain to them, when I show them how to scratch, I always teach them the baby scratch, because it's the first scratch, and I give them a brief video demo on Grand Wizard Theodore, who invented the cuts, and then I show them that video of myself, and I said, look, even though scratching looks quite aggressive, when you actually, and I turn the volume down and I show them my record hand, and my hand hardly, you're not being heavy-handed on there.
and you've been really gentle with the record. And I explained to them is that if you weren't, any turntablist or any DJ back in the day who was DJing, you develop a soft touch on the track because you can't go crazy on it. So I can be doing full backspins, 2 records with my elbows, but you just have to be light on it. Otherwise, you either snap the needle or it just skips all over the place. And yeah, many times I've messed up in the competition, but you just move on. You try it 1 or 2 times. I remember I entered the ITF battle in Birmingham in Custard Factory. I was one of the favourites to win. This was in 2000 something. And no, it's 1997, something like that, because I was still in Wolverhampton. And I turned up, I had these 12 sets to do. And my first set, couldn't get my needles to work, just kept skipping. Just couldn't do it, and I just had to stop. Whatever I did, I put new needles on there, did the tone arm, put extra weight on, just did not work. Nothing, I just could not get past. And I went out in the first round because I just couldn't even focus on, couldn't do it. And I practiced my ass off for that set, that was the first ITF I'd done, and I was one of the favourites, and I just couldn't, it just would not work for me that day. So there's always little errors, but most of the time you can hide it, you can get through it. And the adrenaline, you get 6 minutes, but you're so pumped. By the time you get through it, you probably got 30 seconds left because you're rushing through it. You don't mean to, but you can't help yourself, because especially when you get a good reaction from the crowd, you just go off. You go off. You just think, oh, I'm amazing. And then it just hypes you up.
Do you think that competitions were harder back in the 80s and 90s because Finns were still new and populated with more styles and innovation that changed the trajectory?
Yeah, it's like DMCs are online now, and DJ competition. They've got a few. I think the IDA, the Polish one, that's really good, and they've got the Goldie Awards, which is A-Track's one. And DMC has been online for a long time now. Goldie Awards still do a live event, and so do the IDA. I'm not sure if they're going to keep doing that, but it was definitely harder back in the days because there were so many people doing it. I used to when I turned up to the Birmingham heat, there was 60 DJs in that, and you get 3 minutes in the day, and you've got to go through it. So you got to go through 60 people, and then the best 10 go through to the night, and then your winner goes through to the UK final. So that for example, and what you could do if you entered a competition, you didn't win, you could go and enter another heat. So this is why a lot of us guys, we used to travel around. So me and JB went to Romford, and he went down there and won the Romford heat. Then we went to Bristol, and then if you didn't win in Bristol, you can go somewhere else, and eventually you would win. And I was lucky because I won the Birmingham heat quite early on, because me and JB ended together. He came second, I come first. So we went on to, I think it was Romford, and he won Romford. And then Jamie went on to, it was we went to Bristol. So you could just keep going on, and then obviously you're just getting better and better. And some nights you would do an amazing set, and other nights you trash it. So you had a lot of competition. It was definitely harder because of the competition, but also it was just each year was new stuff. Like I said, there was waves, there was body tricks. Then there was how fast you could go. Then it came out how technical, then how good at scratching you were, or how funky your scratches were. And it changed. And each year you had to modify it to stay ahead, And then obviously more DMC videos used to come out. And then you had access. Then they had the American finals. That changed a lot because you could see what the American guys were doing. And they were slightly ahead. Not in I think we were just as innovative, but they were ahead scratching wise, I was out of battling when they started bringing in the ability to use Serato and stuff, and now you can use whatever you want. But back in the day, it was just 2 techniques and a mixer, and you had to use the one they provided. But now you can use anything you want. So you all had to, number one, somebody had to own that mixer. So we all had to buy the DMC mixers, and the crossfaders weren't the best, and you batter the crap out of those things. They didn't last very long. You'd be spraying WD-40 into them and get them to come back, and you'd snap them off and you'd try and super glue them back on, or you take it out and try and put something else. I remember I had a Gemini mix, I can't think of the name of it, the one Cash Money and Jazzy Jeff had, and I bought that from America. And that thing was just unreal because it was so small. So I had a phonic mixer, which was about, 2 foot long. And then you've got this amazing Gemini mixer, which is about 10 inches wide. And obviously that means you can get closer to the decks, push your decks closer, and you can get faster. So you can do your techniques. So technology-wise, really wasn't nothing to do with the turntable. It was the mixer. The mixer,
Right.
The smaller that mixer, you could push the decks in closer. And then obviously it got to a point where we went battle style. So instead of the turntable horizontal, you spun it vertically. So you'd have more room on the left-hand side then to move, and you'd have less chance of knocking the needle off. And now that's translated to even controllers like the Rev 7 by Pioneer. Now they've just released the first battle style controller with jog wheels with moving platters as well in battle style. So any turntablist you'll see, they'll turn the deck vertical with the pitch at the top. Instead of on the right hand side, it's on the top. And that just opens up a lot more doors, gives you a lot more space. So technology was really innovation from the DJ, but the mixer had a lot to do with it. There was one called the mix stick, the Vestax one, and that was only about 4 inches wide, 5 inches wide, super long and slim. And obviously you could put that in even closer. So yeah, that was the only chance you had of changing technology, and that's why it leveled the playing field, because you couldn't use anything else. When you entered DMC, you used the mixer they had that year, and that was it. You couldn't do anything else. So everyone was it was all equal.
How have you embraced technology yourself within the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, financially, it all depends on cash. I remember when the first DVS, digital vinyl system stuff started coming out. I remember, I think it was, what was it called? I can't remember what it was called now. I saw some guy using it. I was thinking, what is that? But then Serato came out with the box. You had the sort of the audio interface when you plugged it in, and I saw that and I thought, this is amazing, because number one, you used to have to carry records everywhere you go. Yeah. I mean, even though I love vinyl, I used to spend like my younger days just hunting that stuff out, just turning up. You've got a laptop, and I think Jazzy Jeff said it changed his way he toured, because when he used to tour, he used to have to take 6 cases of records, and now he just takes a laptop with 20,000 songs on it. It's just easier. Technology-wise, I mean, like I said, I was out of battling before they introduced being able to use technology, so it never really influenced me. But now, when I'm DJing now, I use a lot of CDJs now. So, and I still apply those, the turntablist principles to using CDJs, but I play a lot more house music now because there's more opportunities for me, because I don't really keep up with the scratching stuff as much as I used to, because there's not as many avenues to play it, and more specialized guys, and the young guys, that's their turn now. I've done my bit, I've put my stamp on it, but I still love the technology. I've got a 4-deck Pioneer CDJ system that's set up now, and I'm just learning how to use 4 decks, working on that, and it's amazing. It's actually a lot harder to DJ on CDJs, because they're not moving platters, they're static. There's static jog wheels, so it's only the section in the middle. So when you're doing backspins, it's actually quite hard. So if you can backspin on CDJs, you've got a lot more. You're doing all right.
When you think about the 80s, when you think about the 90s, what was it that sticks out about those moments that have a lasting value today in terms of what it is you're doing and teaching?
I think innovation was the main thing, because, like I said, we didn't have access to see anybody else. You didn't have YouTube. You could go on and see what the next guy was doing. And I think if we'd had that then, it would have, like, YouTube is an amazing tool to learn. I use that a lot to learn everything. I lots of stuff. But it's a hit or miss, because you go on there and you want to be a turntablist or you want to be a DJ, and you see someone who's incredible. It's very easy to go, I'll never be that good, and it puts you off. Whereas back in the day, you didn't know if you were good or bad, so you didn't give up. You just kept going, and eventually you'd find out through execution. You turn up to a gig or you turn up to a DMC competition. If you never won it, you know the deal, yeah. And you know yourself if you're putting the time in. But now on YouTube, for example, I can type in crab scratch, demo. Like when I studied in university painting, even in university in 1996 to 97 to 2000, the internet was only just coming out then. And if I wanted to, I remember I'd go into the library to learn how to paint an eye or to paint clouds. I had to get a book out. But that made me focus a lot more. Now I can just go on there, and I still do painting now and art, and I just go on how to do this. And there is literally thousands of tutorials on this. So sometimes I think it stifles creativity, whereas back in the day there, because you didn't know what everyone else was doing, you just kept going and you innovated because you didn't know what everyone else was doing. So that's what I've taken through in all my DJing and everything I've ever done. I always try and think ahead rather than just do what everyone else is doing. I learn what they're doing and then just try something different. But I think it for me, it really developed creativity and no fear of failing. I just used to do something. If it worked, it worked. And I still do that now with all the stuff. If I want to try a new venture, I try it, and I don't care about money. It gave me ambition.
Yeah. There's a hunger. It feeds you.
Yeah. And it's still there now, to my detriment in some things. There's lots of things I could have changed in my life, but at the time I was focused on, selfishly, if not, I was focused on trying to advance myself, and that's the thin line you tread, I guess.
Well, let's talk about you advancing others through what it is you do now. We've been talking about practice a lot throughout this interview. Let's talk about purpose. Take me into your transition from DJ XL to Bad Meaning Good, and what leads you to teaching turntablism today.
Okay, so I finished battling. 1998 was my last battle. I came second. I was battling the Scratch Perverts, Tony Vegas and Prime Cuts and all those guys.
We need to talk about that. Let's not just leave that that.
Well,
let's talk about that.
I was in the Enforcers. I was in Enforcers with Pogo and Swift, and there was like a rivalry there. And that was a nice little rivalry. But I come into that late. I mean, I was on the tail end of. I think like one of my best sets I've ever done was the 1997 UK final. And that was in Sankey Soaps, and DJ Noise, the world champion, was there. He was judging, and he also came on to do a showcase. We all had a battle at the end, like a freestyle battle, and that was like an incredible time. And I left the Enforcers not long after that. And then I entered the 98s. I came second again, and I just thought, that's enough of this. But previously, before that, I'd won the Vestax UK final. So the same DJs, the same, but different judges. So, that's sort of, I think I just got a bit disillusioned by coming up with all these different ideas and stuff. I mean, everyone was coming up with ideas, but I always felt that I was quite innovative. And then I always I just didn't quite get there, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, as they say. And then I entered the Vestax competition, exactly the same, and then I won it straight away. So that was great for me, and that was a really wicked competition. And then I went to Japan and met Q-bert and all those guys through that. But after 98, I ended up going to university. And then I sort of moved away from DJing, just DJing in bands. I moved to London after university in Birmingham or Wolverhampton. And I was in London for about 18 years, but I did a lot of art there, lots of bands, just DJing, just playing, music. Did a lot of producing, just made a lot of trip hop, working with people, but not really focused. And then I ended up moving to Barcelona from London, then back home. And then my mum recently passed away, and I got made redundant. And I just thought, doing a job I didn't want to do, even though I love DJing, sometimes unless you're really focused, it doesn't pay the bills. So, it turns into this hobby, and then you've got this burning desire to do what you're good at, but you can't make money from it as you thought you could. So you just sort of have to compromise. And then, like I said, my mum passed, and I lost my job, and I just thought, I'm just going to give this a go. So I looked into it and ended up working with a great company, Gwent Music. They supply all the musical instruments and tutors for all the schools in Gwent and Torvine. Simon Linden, and amazing guy, really helpful. And I sort of freelanced with those guys. And then I ended up working with the Riverfront. Sally Evans helped me out quite a lot there, doing the Scratch Club. So now I just, I still DJ professionally as well when I can. But these workshops, we're growing the workshops because people don't realize you can do GCSE DJing now in school because it's been classified as a musical instrument.
Amazing.
So if I'd have had that when we were in school, all we had were the standard trades, which is still amazing to do. I wish I'd learned one of them as well. But I was obsessed with DJing, and if I'd have had that in school, the chance to do that. So I tell the kids they can do that now. I get booked for workshops, and I go in and I teach the little ones, the primary schools from about 6 onwards and upwards, and some of the high schools. And it's growing at the moment. We're trying to grow it so that the awareness is there. We've got guys come in and do rapping, and we've got beatbox, Dean beat technique. I don't know if you probably know Dean. And then we work together. We do workshops, and then lately I've been going to be working with a guy called Tommy Boost, who's an amazing b-boy, and we're going to be doing a workshop which I created called Back to the Old School, where we show the inception of hip hop, really, where it started, which is with Kool Herc as a selector rather than a scratch DJ, but using the break, extending the break for the dancers to dance to, hence break boys, break girls, b-boys. So we're going to be doing that, teaching them the basics of break dancing or b-boying, and then I go into a brief demo showing them how to extend a break and looking for the break of a track and why they extended it, which was the best part for people to dance to. So we've got all these different workshops, and we're just trying to grow awareness and get people bringing it forward, because obviously a lot of the younger people now, they even if they're in a music class, they get trained classically as well, but they listen to electronic music. So and I think Grant Music specifically identified that, and I've done something about it and getting us guys in to try and modernize certain aspects and offer something that people want, as well as the classics, you know.
Do you still think about scratch patterns the way you used to?
Not anymore, because I just use, I'm looking to play out a lot more now. That's why I said earlier I've swapped over to using a lot more house music, and it's great for me as well, because even when I was younger, I used to have a lot of house music. I worked in a record shop, and I used to get tons of, like, all the reps used to come and give me anything I wanted out of the record case. So I had tons of music, a lot of house music, but then obviously I got into more specialized into the hip hop scene. But scratch techniques, I mean, I invented the Twiddle Scratch or flashed crab scratch, and there's been debates of who invented that, and because I showed that to Q-bert and Shortcut in Japan in the early 90s, and that was because I was trying to learn the flare scratch back home. I ended up developing that, and then I showed them that, and now it's one of the most recognized scratch in the world.
What's up? This is DJ Q-bert, Invisible Scratch Pickles, and I'm speaking on the crab scratch. How I got that idea was from this guy, DJ XL. I saw him tapping the fader, and I guess we call that a twiddle scratch, or he might have named it the twiddle scratch. And then I was like trying it. I was like, wow, that's really difficult to do. So I was like, what if I just rub my fingers across the fader instead of tapping it? So I rubbed all my 4 fingers, besides my thumb, of course. I used my thumb as a spring, and I rubbed my 4 fingers across the fader, and I came up with the crepe scratch. We call it a crepe scratch because there was we went to Lebanon, and we were like, we want to order a crepe. And then the lady was like, oh, you want a crepe? And so we were laughing, me and Mixmaster Mike, and we named it the crepe scratch. And of course, we did that on the Turntable Mechanics workshop, and you can see it's all spelled like crepe. And then nobody could pronounce it, so it became the crab scratch.
It was great because there's the idols who I looked upon as like masters, and they're looking at me, this little Welsh dude who came up with like which really sort of changed the way a lot of people scratched. I mean, I don't really get into the whole who invented it sort of thing, because I know what I did developing it, forward, using hamster style and the other way. And there's always people saying who invented it. So I don't get caught up in that. I mean, I'm just happy to be part of in the whole thing that is turntablism. I invented something that changed a lot of the way that scratching happened. And I respect like Q-bert and Shortcut, like who I was with over there, and DJ Rapmatic and Melody and all these guys from the Beat Junkies. It was just amazing to be with those guys, and they were just, you know, they were supreme talents. So, you know, sometimes you think, oh, you know, we invented this, it's all rubbish anyway, because, you know, I ripped off loads of people's stuff, and they've ripped, other people rip each other off all the time. So people try and sort of goad you into saying you did this and you did that. I know in my head what we did, and that's all that matters. And I just loved meeting those guys, because I had pictures of them on my wall, and, you know, I remember meeting them. Yeah, well, they still are. I mean, like Q-bert, you know, there's so many amazing scratches now, but that guy has just got something different. You know, he's just an amazing. He's an amazing talent. All those guys are from the Scratch Pickles and the Executioners with, you know, Rock Rado sadly passed away.
Hi there, I'm Cutmaster Swift, and I am the former 1989 DMC World Champion. I'm a member of the Enforcers crew, DJ Pogo, DJ Billy Business, Mad Cut, and DJ XL. And the additions of Mad Cut and DJ XL literally came on our radar because we acknowledge XL within the championships when we had obviously stopped competing in the competition. So I was hosting the DMC events and judging them as well. Yes, very exciting XL with innovative ideas grabbed our attention. And, you know, when DJs talk, there's always similarities we feel comfortable in talking about, and influences, and what our goals are, and basically just reminiscing over certain things. And XL's struck that bone with us, you know, and that's why we pretty much initiated him into the crew. I don't think he ever really competed with us, but he did, you know, a lot of the time associate with DJ Pogo. And yeah, he's a very innovative person. A lot of people may not know he's the reason why there's a crab scratch, because he created something called the Twiddle Scratch, and he thought that's how they were doing the flare scratch, because the flare is a cousin of the transformer, which requires you moving the fader very rapidly to chop the sound up into very fine parts. So XL, because flaring had the speed but more of the smoothness compared to transforming, because transforming is very choppy, because you're chopping on, off, if that makes sense. Off, on, off. Sorry, that's the correct saying of it. But flares are on, off, on. So it's the opposite of that. So the fader's mainly always open. And he worked out by using his individual fingers, he could get that rapid speed. And he showed it to Q-bert and Mixmaster Mike, and they went, oh, okay, that's not what we're doing, but that's very interesting. And then Q-bert thought, okay, instead of using 3 fingers, which is the thumb and your middle finger and your pointer, he thought, why not use all 4 fingers bouncing off the thumb? And it was in Lebanon, I believe, he said they called it the khab scratch, because they were eating khabs, crepes, but they pronounce it as khab. And yeah, he called it, someone said, oh, I like how you're doing that crab scratch. And that's how that came about. But there's a little bit of a dispute about who is the actual creator of it, because DJ Disc, who was also from San Francisco and a very reputable DJ, who's the pioneer of the orbit scratch, or the orbit flare, says he lays claims to he helped innovate the crab scratch. So, you know, these things happen all the time in the art form, you know. It's a very respected technique. It's adopted worldwide. Everybody uses it. So credit to all, you know, but it's very important that people do know that it initially came from DJ XL, because he's the one that inspired that idea.
practice, well, I've gone off topic a bit, but practice wise, I don't really practice. I just use the basics because, you know, you can be as amazing as you want at scratching, but if you're playing a party, you can't really just stand there and scratching. That's why I've sort of tried to move into partying as I'm getting older. Number one, I'm not as flexible as I was. And I've got, you know, quite extensive arthritis in my right hand of all things now. All the cartilage is gone, and I know all the innuendos are going to come out now. You know, what you've been doing with your right hand, but partially, I'm saying it's through scratching, just letting you put it out there. But so I don't really practice the techniques. I still keep up with it for the kids, and like if I'm teaching the crab scratch or the flare scratch, I'll teach them that. You know, I practice it, but I don't really actively do a lot of sort of battle practice because I've done my time. You know, I enjoyed it while it was there, but now I found house music now, and for me that's great because it's. You know, at one point, I know it sounds bad, but I got a bit bored of playing the same hip hop tunes all the time. You know, how many times can I keep playing Peter Piper or, you know, Run DMC, even though it's a killer track? So after a while, I got a bit bored of it, and then I had a bit of a break, and then it's a sort of now I'm getting more into the house music. I've got hundreds of thousands of house tracks I can discover which I've never heard before, and I apply my turntablist sort of mentality to that and try and do a few things which are outside the box. Like I said, I'm just starting to use 4 CDJs and trying to apply that, and like doing jazz sets using, you know, nice. I make some stems and trying to, as if I'm playing the drums, but on CDJs, or playing bass or playing the harmonica and stuff. So yeah, it's just moved on a bit, and I'm still creative with it, but you got to play it to the audience because they don't understand. Most audience members, you got to think if you go to a club, most of them are going to be off it. And I just use it as an attention grabber, you know, to get people's attention. And then you give them what they want, and then every now and again, just rip it up to make yourself stand out.
What's next for you? What's next for Bad Meaning Good?
So I want to. Obviously, I'm trying to grow my business, stay in business as well, because you know what's happening with everything's got 25 pence added to it. You know, you get a bit of pasta. It's £1.25 now instead of £1, £1. You go in Poundland and everything's £1.25 or £1.50. It's supposed to be Poundland. What's happening, Poundland? Sort it out. But I'm just trying to, like I said, I'm 51 now, 52 in January, and I really just want to meet what I miss about DJing, because at the moment I'm not doing a lot of gigs, and I'm in Newport and there's not a lot going on, you know, as in music wise for me anyway, what I can get into. So I'm just trying to keep my business going by doing the workshops and advancing doing stuff like that, and also trying to grow sets, you know, my DJ sets, to try and get more gigs myself. And I just want to, what I missed about the DMCs is the access to talented people, how many people you meet, you know, really good people who are super talented, and it just takes you around. So I'd be happy just to make, you know, everyone wants to make a good living, but I'm more now in this age. I just want to play music, meet lots of really, you know, great people, just create, get more friends, you know, just link up with a lot more people, travel around a little bit more. And like I said, the money isn't the primary drive. It's just being able to do this rather than having to do something I don't want to do, you know?
Meaning Good, thanks so much for taking the time out to do this, man. It's been an absolute joy talking about this history.
Oh, man, I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Luke.
We've been talking about his importance throughout this series so far. Founder of Street Sounds, Morgan Khan, is with us to talk about the impact of his Street Sounds compilations in Wales and across the UK.
Hi, my name is Morgan Khan. I'm founder and CEO of Street Sounds. Street Sounds was actually launched, conceived back in 1982. I thought of the concept of Street Sounds as a way of the average person, including myself, by the way, because I've always seen myself as a punter, a fan, as well as being, so to speak, in the industry. I wanted to find a way, because I was spending a lot of money buying import records from the States. I used to go each week to different outlets in London, different distributors, Bluebird, Groove Records, City Sounds, and excuse me, wait for the import vans to arrive on a Friday, and we would get the latest imports from the States. At that particular time, or late 70s, early 80s, the music that was definitely the most prolific in terms of what I was into and the sound was all coming from the US. We still hadn't developed or established our own hip hop or alternative street scenes in the UK or Europe. So I pick up these import records, and it's costing me a lot of money, a great deal of money. Imports cost in those days. And I had previously to this started my music career. This was 1982, 5 years, 4.5, 5 years earlier, when I was working on pirate radio jockey, as a DJ, and then starting off as postboy. What a great achievement for someone who's supposed to be a doctor, as postboy at Pi Records. This was in 1978. I was fortunate enough, and I'm skipping back because it'll make sense when I go forward again. I was fortunate enough to have superb mentors around me, the very best of A&R, marketing, Dave McAleer, contracts, financial, Madeline Hawkyard. Too many people to actually name, but they were phenomenally brilliant people, and I say the best at what they do. And I quickly, from postboy, went to disco promotions manager, label manager, within Pi Records. And Pi Records at that time was a major distributor. They had labels like Casablanca with Donna Summer, Parliament. They had Buddha, Gladys Knight, High Cream, Al Green, and Peebles, 20th Century, Barry White, Gene Chandler. The list goes on. That was an important time for me, because in late 79, I was asked by the then managing director of Pi Records to evaluate a new label that they were considering. And as I was in charge of the disco promotion side, the black music side of Pi, and having tremendous success already at young and tender age, so to speak, they asked me to fly to the States. Unbeknown to me at that stage, the label would become synonymous with hip hop, with Sugar Hill Records. And I got on a plane, flew to the States, and I won't go through the intricacies, the details, but I met with Joe Robinson, Sylvia Robinson, and was in the studio in Inglewood, where their studios were. And that was the first time I heard in a studio environment, as opposed to driving to Inglewood and on the street, seeing these kids on the street toasting to these hot kerosene. Try and imagine a Rocky scene, and they're standing by these huge gasoline drums, keeping warm. And they'll kind of, we know it now as rapping, but toasting, singing over beats. When I got in the studio of Sugar Hill Records, that was the first time, as I said, I heard rap, and it was Sugar Hill Gang Rapper's Delight. So I was there. I also heard other products that are in the can, projects that are in the can. Positive Force, we got the funk. I was listening to other artists that were on the Sugar Hill label, Grandmaster Flash, Melly Mel, so many things in the can that was still in production mode. And I can be honest to you, I had never in my life in the industry been more excited hearing this genre of music. Cutting a long story short, brought back hip hop, we signed Sugar Hill. Sugar Hill Gang had the first commercial rap record. I had great success with Pi. I decided to leave. It's a long story. It's not connected with street sounds or hip hop. I decided to leave, created my first record label, R&B Records. And my first signing was Imagination, my first group. Again, tremendous chart and sales success with that. And I still continued my American side. So I still had my American label, which I used to develop American and promote and release American artists. So R&B was my UK label. My American label was Excalibur. Why Excalibur Records? Because at Pi, I had a label called Caliber, and I just wanted to fuck them off and decided to create a label with a play of words. Again, great success, but my partners and I fell out there. But I was headhunted then at that stage. We're talking about 81, 82 by CBS, now Sony. And they offered me a label deal. And the label deal, I created Street Wave Records, which became the sister company for Street Sounds. Street Wave was to develop artists and bring them through the whole A&R mill. And again, great success. My first release was Alton Edwards' track called I Want to Spend Some Time With You, went top 10, phenomenally successful around the world. But there was still always in my heart this American side in terms of it was still cutting edge. Even with my product in the UK, it was almost to be honest, if I can be as candid and transparent as possible, it was almost an emulation, a facsimile of what was coming out of the States. It had, of course, its own signature, and the group and the artists had their own style, but it was always not copying is the wrong word. It was trying to reproduce an American sound. And then let's fast forward a little bit, getting to 82, and I used to buy these import records. I started hearing music that came in, and I wanted to be able to have that and buy those 12 inches, but a lot of people couldn't afford to do it. So I came up with the concept of creating an album series. And the actual first incarnation, which only lasted a few months, was Streetwise. And that's Street Noise, sorry. There's a Street Noise album, which you can still find on Discogs on, I think it still goes for some ridiculous amount. And that was released with my distributor, my label, who had Streetwave, called CBS, which I mentioned. It was an underground success, but that inspired me to put out more albums, more releases. And I changed the name from Street Noise and to Street Sounds. And that was going to be a compilation, quote unquote, the catchphrase at the time, the latest, greatest dance tracks. And that's what I wanted it to be. Import records, 8 or 10 on each album. Instead of the price of an extortionate 12-inch single from America, it will be a UK domestic album price. The rest, so to speak, is history. Became a slow burn, I must admit, because I didn't get the support of the UK labels. That's an important point to mention. As usual, something new, something entrepreneurial, they didn't see or understand it. Remember, at this stage, the majors did not understand, appreciate, or acknowledge Black music could sell. They did not see it. Their rosters, their A&R departments were pop rock geared. They didn't have any Black music departments. Closest they got was disco departments or disco managers. They went to where that what was happening in the streets, in the streets of New York, and to be happening in the streets of the UK and Europe there was a street scene developing, and that street scene initially was electro. That brings us to the birth of the electro street sound album. So the first albums on Street Sounds were dance, soul. This is the beginning of 82. I started flying to the States. And when I started flying to the States, I started realizing and seeing, because I was in touch with a lot of the studios, and people saw what I was doing with Street Sounds. And they knew my history, of course, during my Pi days and my CBS days. And I started receiving demos on cassettes. And of course, every year I used to go to the New Music Seminar, which was an event that was created by Tom Silverman of Tommy Boy Records. It was a great conference. Everyone would go down there, many independent labels, and you would meet the Marriott in New York. A lot of people used it to get drunk, a lot of drugs, girls, typical absolute rock and roll. But it was a forum. It was a conduit of artists, producers, and independent labels. This is where I met Corey Robbins' profile, Tom Silverman, Tommy Boy, Bobby Robinson, B-Boy Records. So, we're talking about the nucleus of what was about to happen on the street scene. I met them all, and they were releasing these 12-inch singles, selling in the tri-state area of America. That's New York, New Jersey. What's the third one? It'll come to me. The tri-state of New York, but not selling anywhere else. And I told them, let me license this repertoire for Europe. Let me take it on board. I think it's amazing. It's fresh. It's different. It's energetic. It has power. It's new. It's fresh. And I started licensing repertoire. And I realized from the licensing the repertoire that there was a new style hitting. There's a new music that was coming out, both from the East and West Coast of America. And this music was raw. It was primal. It was so exciting for me. It was electro, which of course evolved, morphed, and became hip hop. So these were the beginning, and these was the reason, and I think the foundation, were the foundations of where kind of street electro hip hop began. So that's a little taster of where and what Street Sounds was about. Street Sounds went on to release 23, I think, electro albums, numerous other genre compilations within the Street Sounds umbrella. We were, without question, which I'm so glad has been acknowledged numerous times, we brought street culture, street music to Europe. Because when I say street culture, it was a style of music that had a culture around it. The elements of hip hop we now know. It had the music, the beats. It had the graffiti. It had the breakdancing. It had all those different elements that were culturally and are culturally significant to hip hop. And without the Street Sound compilations as an access point for a whole generation of kids to listen to, I'm sure it would happen. I'm sure. I'm not naive or egotistic enough to think it wouldn't have happened with someone else down the line. But because we were this conduit, we weren't diluting what we were doing. We were pure to the music, to the core, to the scene. It created and developed the scene, which of course Street Sounds led, and we very much put our energies and efforts towards, which culminated in terms of the first huge event, which was any event in Europe, which was the UK Fresh 1986 event. But that's another conversation. So that's a little bit about the history of the birth of Street Sounds.